Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, I'll be releasing 4 new flood and drain designs, all unique for unique applications, 3 of which gave me direct inspiration for the 4th, which is the UNIFlood. The UNIFlood is a single point flood and drain device which allows you to flood and drain a bed using a single hole and consolidating all of the flood and drain devices within one compact and bilaterally symmetrical unit. So let's get to discussing the 3 devices that gave me inspiration for it, their applications, and see them in practice. Okay, so here we have in practice the first device. This whole system floods and drains from this flood and drain point, which has a shroud over it that is removable, and it floods and drains out of the reservoir, which is directly underneath the table itself. I released a video on how to build this bed a few weeks ago, and since then I've actually updated the files of this flood and drain device, allowing it to be connected to a quick connect adapter. It's the same as most of your hose fittings, and it allows you to connect and disconnect a pump, which will allow you to quickly and easily perform maintenance on your pump. And with the addition of a 3/8 O-ring, will allow you a watertight seal on the bottom of your flood inlet. So as you can see, the bed is working absolutely perfectly. I am super happy with this design and I can highly recommend building it. In here at the moment, I've got micro tomatoes, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, lettuce within our cotton wool technique. I'm also trialing some onions, radish, carrot, and beetroot, all within Jiffy peat pellets. And the flood and drain technique has been working wonderfully. As you can see, we've got germination on a lot of our seeds, and I've just been utilizing these nursery trays to keep the nutrient out of the light. As it floods and drains, there is obviously going to be spaces in between the Jiffy pellets, and I found these nursery trays which hold a 42mm Jiffy pellet perfectly, whilst also allowing our nutrient solution to fully flood and drain out through holes in the bottom of the trays. There is almost no water left sitting in the bottom of this flood and drain bed once it is flooded and drained. And over in the corner here, I actually have clones. So I've been doing a lot of work around the property, and I've wanted to plan out the property with lily pillies and natives. So rather than purchase them, I have taken cuttings, which I'm cloning within my hydroponic system as well. I'm not sure how the natives will respond to a weak hydroponic nutrient, but there's only one way to find out. The success of this flood and drain table was the direct inspiration for my adaptation of this. This is actually an ice table. This was suggested to me by a comment by one of our viewers, so thank you so much for making me aware of this product's presence. So this table is actually the catalyst for the UNIFlood. Out of necessity comes invention, and I needed a way of flooding and draining a table through the single hole which this table has. There are a lot of steps that led me to this design, so let me walk you through them. The original first step was the creation of a flood and drain adapter that was 3D printable. Now that happened within the first 3D printable flood and drain adapter video, and I created a larger version of this shroud as well as the flood and drain points, which allowed me to flood and drain a bed whilst also being able to maintain the flood and drain by removing roots and such. In response to that video, I had a Patreon, Jacob, reach out to me and tell me that he had actually utilized my design in his own design, and he created this. Now, this is a miniaturized version of the 3D printable flood and drain system, and it is completely redesigned. He has not taken my files and adjusted them. He has sat down with my files in mind and designed this anew on his CAD program, and he has tailored it to his needs. Now, his needs were that this fit within a small tub which is available to him in his local area, so that he is then able to stack it and move it when it's not in use. Here is a scaled up version which I had printed, and you can see that all the pieces, and I apologize for my crappy 3D printing, screw into each other, unlike mine, which just press into each other. Jacob actually gifted me and my Patreons the files, and they've existed in the community tab of Patreon for quite some time now. Months after this, Jacob actually reached out to me again with this. This is a single point flood and drain design that Jacob based upon my original flood and drain designs. And the way that this works is that it floods and drains through a hole in the bottom of the single screw. So the flood comes through the center hole and the drain flows out through the outside hole, and you raise the flood level by raising this horseshoe shape on the outside of the flooding point. So you can just add in and remove horseshoe shaped additions to raise and lower the flood of this device. Now, I really liked this design. The only caveats to this is it's quite finicky to print, and at the size that it's designed to be printed, which is this smaller size, it's a bit less versatile than I would like. That being said, I absolutely loved this design, and I wanted to use the inspiration from this idea to create my own single point flood and drain device. Jacob sent me the files for this and gifted those as well to me and my Patreons. I want to take a second to give credit to Jacob for these files and say thank you from me and my Patreons, and also reach out to anyone that has been tinkering with the 3D printable ideas that I've been releasing. If you have been playing around with my designs and you'd like to give back to the community, just send me an email. I've got my email address in the description of every video, and we can have your files up on the community tab of the Hoochos Patreon for all of the other patrons to use as well. It was only yesterday, in fact, that another Patreon, Luke, sent me his version of the Hooch multi-bucket, which he adapted from my original Hooch bucket, and that design is now on the Patreon in the community folder as well. There's tons of people playing around with designs, and I'm more than happy to put those designs into the community folder for you guys to play around with. So with all of these designs in mind, and the latest flood and drain propagation table at the forefront of my mind, a viewer actually reached out through the comments of that video and made me aware of this. This is an ice table which is used within the service industry to hold drinks and ice for parties. Now, it would usually have a drain in the middle with a plug. This table actually removes the complete need to build your own flood and drain table. The only problem is it doesn't come with a flood and drain point, and there are no flood and drain adapters on the market that flood from a single point. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a flood and drain point which was able to be fit through the center of this ice table so that we could utilize it as a flood and drain bed. Now, the file that Jacob sent me is actually too short on the screw side to fit through this ice table. I also wanted something that was a little bit more versatile to release to the public as my own design, and I wanted it to be consistent with my designs as well, because everyone has their own style of design. Another thing that I wanted was I wanted it to print in one solid unit, and I wanted it to be bilaterally symmetrical. The reason for this is I wanted the unit to flood out evenly on all sides and to collect water evenly as well. With this in mind, I created this. This is the UNIFlood. The way that this works is when connected to a hose, which is supplied by a pump, utilizing the quick connect feature that I designed and added to my first flood and drain release. This design is supplied water from below. The water travels up through the center of the device and is split into 4 outlets around the edge of the device. Now, I've actually created multiple versions for different applications. From our quick connect fitting, our water travels along the center of our device, and as you can see in this cutaway, it then reroutes to the external of the device and out 4 points at the base of the bed. I've designed it so that all of these points are fed equally and it floods out evenly on every side. This allows the bed to be flooded from the base of this device, as well as once the flood reaches a certain level, it allows it to drain through the external of the central column as well. So the water will enter through the base, exit through the sides, and then as the water raises, it will then cascade over the top of either the open top, or I have designed risers that fit within the symmetrical shape within this device. These will just slot into place and allow you to raise and lower the flood level. And at the top, you add in a shroud, which protects the drain from any media that will fall back into this system. This whole design can be printed upside down on your print bed with 0 supports, and that is the way that I've designed it. There is nothing over a 45-degree angle, and the only bridge exists at the very apex of this central bilaterally symmetrical design. In addition to all of these features, there are multiple designs. This design is made to fit directly into an ice table like this without any shroud and seal onto the seal that is provided. Now, I'll put a link in the description to where I got this ice table so that if you do want to print this and utilize this design within this ice table, you can do that. I will have an upcoming video where I look in depth at the flood and drain technique and utilize this table within a time lapse. So like and subscribe and keep an eye on the channel for that one. The other design that I've created is for not only this table, but any table. This is the alternative design. I have added in a bead that travels around the outside so that you can add in silicone and seal this against the table that you're working with. It also has these wings. These wings on the outside allow you to screw and unscrew a shroud like this over the top of and screw onto our UNIFlood fitting. This gives us one compact unit, which is flooding and draining the bed, as well as making maintenance of the flood and drain extremely simple and hassle-free. This reduces the footprint of our flood and drain into a single device that can be put anywhere within any bed, which gives us massively simplified maintenance with the cleaning out of roots, as well as the connection and disconnection of your pump. The only thing that this device requires is that you have your reservoir directly under the flood and drain point. There is no secondary connection for a drain outlet. You have to have the flood and drain directly above your reservoir. This is something that I'll be working on in the future to try and adapt so that we have both a flood and drain point. I could not think of a way to have both the inlet and outlet accessible in such a way that allowed the nut fit over the top of both points. So let me show you the device in action. Okay, so I'm a massive fan of this table. I did not know they existed until I was made aware by a viewer, so thank you for that. So I'm going to show you the specific design that I made for this table first. The way that it fits in is the table comes with washers for the drain of the table. So it already has everything that we need except for the 3D print and a 3/8 O-ring, which you can actually steal from hose fittings that you already have around the house if you can't find them online. So this fits directly into our table, and to the bottom we add in our nut. There it is. To this we can then connect our pump. Now for the demonstration I'm just going to be using a hose to show you how it works. And this is just a standard quick connect fitting. This would be the end of your pump line, and that just snaps onto place like so. Now, without the shroud, I would highly recommend utilizing the internal shroud, which looks like this, and it fits directly over the top on the UNIFlood device. This is going to stop grow media from entering into the UNIFlood and blocking the return on the device. You also have the option of risers. So I've created multiple different heights of risers so that you can lower or raise the level of the flood depending on the level of your bed. For this bed, I'll be using the shorter riser and the shroud, and that will give me a flood about 1 inch underneath the edges. I'm going to turn on what would be the pump, and I'll show you how it floods. So, turning on the tap now, and you can see it floods evenly on each side and will fill the bed in an extremely consistent way. The bed is now filling from our pump, and this bed will fill completely until it drains back down through the top, through the shroud, and out through the bottom and into where we would have our reservoir. And I've just stopped the flood halfway just to show you there's no leaks. There's no leaks whatsoever. I'm actually stoked with how this is working. So what will happen is when it floods above our shroud, it will start to drain down through these openings onto the ground. Let's turn it back on, continue the flood. That's working incredibly well. And to give you an idea of how it's actually draining, here is the flood without the shroud. I'm actually stoked with how this is working. Really happy. And if we wanted to raise the level of the water, all we have to do is take out our little riser, add in our taller riser, and that will raise the level of the water in the flood so that if you have a grow bed with larger sides, you will be able to utilize a deeper flood within that grow bed. I'm going to actually show you how the larger shroud fits into place on the wing design. So I'm just going to disconnect our pump, and actually you can see how the system drains back down through the pump when it is on its off cycle. So I'll undo that version and I can add in the winged version. So the winged version is almost identical. It just has 2 wings on the outside and fits within a smaller footprint. It's exactly the same process, except over the top, we fit a larger shroud, which just places down over and screws into place and allows us to perform maintenance on the UNIFlood device. And I've actually designed this shroud in multiple iterations so that you can have it at multiple heights as well, because obviously the height of your bed will dictate how high you want your shroud to be. As well as this, I've also added extra points for the water to enter after designing this specific shroud, as you can see in the designs that I've printed off here. And here is an example of how I print these devices. This has got a 5mm brim just to make sure the print doesn't separate halfway through print. It is printed with a 0.8mm nozzle with 0 supports. Okay, so all of these designs are available on my Patreon as of right now. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, check out the video that I've linked next. It is all about the original 3D printable flood and drain hydroponic system. Happy hydroponicking, and I'll see you next time on Hoochos.